Yes, everybody, Russ, the West Ham Network. Hope you are all safe and well. Happy Friday, albeit a frosty Friday. I've had to invest in a little heater for the Bud & Bunker because I can't get the radiator. Can't get to the radiator because that side of the room is basically Joe and Flo's vintage store. It's full of their clothes they're trying to sell. And it's bloody freezing. But I'll tell you what will not be freezing, will be hotting up soon, will be the transfer window. We have got 6 weeks until the window officially opens, and rumours are abound of already in terms of who we're going to sell, who we're going to sign, that type of thing. We've obviously got a game tomorrow as well. We've got Bournemouth, the Vitality. This is the Premier League is back, baby, and we'll be having an opposition chat tomorrow morning, as well as starting 11 show, stat attack, all that good stuff, and the watch along, of course. So make sure you sign up and subscribe and don't miss a single dot of our coverage. But I thought, let's talk January. And I should really do the air horn, sort of warning people. We will be talking about transfers. And I thought what I'd do is go through my big 5 predictions for the West Ham January transfer window. I'm talking realistic moves, not talking about Football Manager. Players I think we could land, and a couple of departures. So let's get into it. And let me know in the comments below what your predictions are. Sensible, sensible predictions. Because I know when I say that, some people maybe not so sensible as others. So let's get into it and talk about my number 1 sort of prediction. Charlie Cresswell. He's my number 1 prediction. Now, obviously, we know centre-back is easily one of the biggest priorities this window. Our back line has been stretched more like, I don't know, more like lots of stuff through inconsistent form, few injuries, that type of thing. You name it, it's happened to West Ham. Very, very poor, particularly from a set-piece perspective, although that's somewhat improved since Nuno's taken over. But there are obviously a couple of names we've been linked with. We've also been linked with the Lille centre-half, Alessandro. However, I believe he's got an injury now, which may well curtail that. I'm led to believe he was Nuno's one of his prime targets. However, the injury has maybe kiboshed a move, but these things change all the time. But I think Charlie Cresswell is our number 1 transfer target. According to X's, we are reigniting our interest in a player we could have got in the summer for a lot less money, in all honesty. Now, I think Charlie ticks many boxes for what we need. He's a no-nonsense defender, aggressive, good in the air. A throwback, really, to how centre-halves used to behave. In terms of being sort of physically dominating. And I think we need that. And as I said, I've always sort of alluded to the fact that once we got rid of Craig Dawson, our defence just changed, didn't look as strong, as solid. And he's got a bit of a young Dawson-esque look about him in terms of the way he plays. He's young, he's homegrown as well. He can comfortably step into the midfield with the ball as well. He's a bit of a leader as well. Again, something which we need. He's got that old school English defender vibe, but with a modern twist. Exactly the profile we'll be looking for years, in all honesty. I think this will be one of our major signings in January transfer window. According to reports, 𝗧𝗢𝗣 are open to doing business. Whether they're open to be doing business with West Ham again after we sort of dick them about for a couple of £1 million, we'll see. And we're led to believe that Charlie wants a move back to the Premier League in any hope of maybe squeezing into that World Cup squad, of which playing Premier League football will obviously put him in more of a profile in front of Thomas Tuchel than maybe playing for 𝗧𝗢𝗣𝗙. We'll wait and see. The trouble is, it makes too much sense. The stars are aligning too much for me, which means it probably won't happen. But that would be my first prediction. If not Charlie, then I think we may well go back and have a look at Alessandro. He's someone who, again, similar ilk in terms of his physicality, but obviously not homegrown and no sort of English football experience. So there will be an adjustment period potentially needed there. So that's why I like Charlie. I just think he could just come in and do a job. He's played, in English football before. He has played for Millwall. Maybe that's an anti thing. But yeah, that's my pick. Number 2, again, I mean, it's no surprise, but a striker. And Francolino 𝗧𝗢𝗪 from FC Midfield. Now, this one gets me excited. He's lighting up the Danish league. And a player that, if you don't know him, you will know him soon. He's explosive pace, 2-footed, direct, fearless. He's basically an absolute chaos on legs, and something that we desperately need. We haven't had, we've got Callum Wilson now playing double shifts, really. We've got Nicholas who wants to leave. And we need a forward who can stretch defenders running behind and cause problems. Now, I did mention the fact that we've probably got someone like Josh Landers, I think, could do the job. But for me, he might be too much of a risk at the moment. But 𝗧𝗢𝗪 can play striker, left-sided forwards. He can drift in the right as well. He's young. And he's got that sort of, I don't care who you are, I'm going to run past you mentality. Do you know what I mean? Sort of that. And I love that. Now, the issue could be price. I would imagine FC Midfield would want to pay their top dollar. So you're looking for about 25 million maybe, which is a significant chunk of change for West Ham. Whether we stump up the cash is another thing. We have been linked to with other forwards, lots of other forwards, and we'll continue to be linked with lots of forwards like Toney. We've been linked with Jimenez and a potential swap deal with AC Milan with 𝗏𝗏. We'll wait and see what happens with that one. But I think 𝗧𝗢𝗪 is that sort of player who would maybe not necessarily go under the radar, because at the end of the day, everyone's got stats. They know how, clinical he is in the Danish league. I just think, I think he's a type of player I think West Ham fans would really love to watch play. Really love to watch play. And could give us that difference, which is what we'd be looking for. Number 3, I don't think, again, comes up to much surprises, but Adama Traore. I think that is almost nailed on that he's going to be a West Ham player come the end of January transfer window. Now, this one will probably divide the fan base more like Moses parting the Red Sea, but I think he would be genuinely a good signing for us as a squad player. There's no denying the fact that he's a player that I always thought would end up in a West Ham shirt. I don't know why, just that type of player, that type of build. He's someone who terrifies fullbacks. And look, the likes of Bowen and Somerville, they can't do it all. And, the overlapping Diouf. Having someone like Adama to come on as an impact player, which is really how we should have been using Antonio for the last 2 years of his career, in my humble opinion. Having that 20-minute, 25-minute burst at the end of the game. If I was a fullback and I saw him come on, all greased up, I'm like, oh, fuck off. Because you've got 70 minutes in your legs. He's got no minutes in his legs. And when fit, he can terrorise. He's an elite transitional threat. A tactical alternative on the counter. He'll always command 2 to 3 defenders on him. And I like players like that. And he's a proper bench weapon, when games get cagey, when he's not going to score 20 goals a season, we know that, but he will change matches. And again, it's a way of reimagining substitutes rather than the substitutes, but as finishers. And I know that it was sort of like that's something that Arteta did, but rugby have been doing it for years. You've got a squad there, and you've got starting 11 or starting 15 in rugby, and then you've got the finishers. He is a finisher. He'll come on and finish the game off. And, even if you're winning the game, you put him up top, and he's going to command defenders stay with him rather than maybe them pushing for the win, the equaliser. It's a thing which will rethink defenders, and if they're chasing the game, having him on there puts them in 2 minds whether to go forward or to hang back. You know what I mean? And I think by all accounts, he's going to cost less than 7-8 million quid. apparently. And if that's the case, I think he's the person in the door. We haven't got game changers. No, let me rephrase that. We haven't got, game changers. Yeah, that's fair enough. We haven't got anyone off the bench who I'm thinking, fuck, that's what we want. We do some. I think someone like 𝗧𝗢𝗣𝗙 could be someone like that, but he doesn't tend to use him. But I think Adama Traore could be a game changer. Now, I'm not saying he's going to start, and the issues are also injuries. He's got hamstrings very similar to issues Antonio had, particularly in sort of the middle of his career. Towards the end, he changed his diet and was less injury prone, but still picked up injuries. Obviously, we've got Fulkrug who gets injured. We've got Callum Wilson who's got injured. And so Adama Traore is someone who also gets injured. And again, if he hadn't got injuries, I think you'd have seen a player who would have been playing at the top level, playing for the big sides. But sadly, injuries have curtailed his career. But I think him and would work well with Nuno. They've worked well together at Wolves, albeit it was, a couple of clubs ago. But still, I just think there's a lot of sense. If we can get him for like less than 5-6 million, if we get him for like 5 million quid, it's absolutely fucking bargain in my opinion. I mean, even for, Super Drugs sale of baby oil, at Stratford, that would pay for itself. Right, let's go for number 4 in terms of outs. The midfield exodus. Now, I think this is pretty much, again, going to be nailed on. But we're talking about departures because I think, for transfer windows, it's not just who comes in, but it's about trimming the squad and clearing the wages and reducing the age as well of the squad. And this might, and I think there's, in essence, 3 midfielders who are going to be leaving in January. One, surprisingly, there is James Ward-Prowse. Hasn't hit the levels we've expected. And he's obviously got great delivery, but the system doesn't suit him. And Premier League football doesn't suit him particularly well either at the moment. He's, I think if he goes, he'll probably go to, I know Everton have been looking at him and there's potential maybe an Everton, 𝗧𝗢𝗣𝗙 Garner swap deal. I'll be all up for that. I'll be honest. I think James Garner's got a lot in his locker. And at 24, he's still got his best years ahead of him. But I think James Ward-Prowse, or he might decide to cut his losses and go back to Southampton. Romero's just gone there, is it? Aurelio Romero's just gone there. And I think, they get the band back together and get themselves back into the Premier League eventually. It'll be a tough task this year, but you never know. Also, I think Andy Irvine will move. Obviously a good player, gone down the pecking order. However, with Scotland being qualifying for the World Cup, he'll want to be on that plane. So I think a loan probably most likely for him with an obligation, or maybe a small perm exit. But I think a loan with an obligation to an option will be key. Whether it's going back to Scotland as well, again, to help his World Cup chances. You wouldn't want to. I mean, this is potentially a generational time in Scotland. The last World Cup since 1998, I believe. So, it's 27 years. I've done the maths. Or 27. Or 26, 28 by the time the World Cup comes along. So, Andy wasn't alive the last time they were in the World Cup. So, he was born 4 years after. I think he's about 24. So, for me, I think, let him go out on loan. We've got enough to cover. We've got some of the kids we can bring through as well. I'd like to see someone like Kante getting some minutes maybe after January. We'll see. Or maybe even someone like James Gardner coming in for James Ward-Prowse. And, there's Prowse is not even getting in the squad, so there's no difference there. But I think with Andy, I think there's a real opportunity there for him to go and play some football and get into that World Cup squad. And then I think Guerrero Rodriguez, obviously. So I think three. Cheers. So I think there's 3 players. Guerrero, I think, is almost inevitable. Hasn't worked. Hasn't settled. Hasn't nailed a spot. Hasn't now done a spot, particularly after Lopetegui left. And the midfield is a crowded market at the moment. We've got plenty of midfielders at the moment. And with these 3 freeing up wages, squad space, it gives us room to reshape the midfield. And eventually heading into the summer, it's something which we need to do. It's necessary in terms of that midfield. So I think that's what we'll see. And lastly, I'm going to go with a surprise. A surprise. Particularly with the likes of Jorge Mendes hanging around. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of madness. A late deadline loan signing from a big European club, whether it's a young midfielder or a winger, from a Champions League side needing minutes, or a fullback, a Barcelona fringe player, a Dortmund youngster, or maybe a Premier League talent we can grab at the last minute. Every January, one of these happens or something, and so there'll be that last minute drama. I think particularly going into the World Cup as well, there'll be a lot of players, the likes of 𝗙𝗓𝗣𝗙 and various others who are on the peripherals of the England squad who may want a loan move to get some minutes in order to knock on the door of England. And not just for England, for other countries as well. Obviously you've got the Brazilian World Cup squad. Wouldn't be surprised to see, maybe a move there for a Brazilian player. I think there'll be a surprise, I think. Just with, as I said, just with Jorge Mendes, the number of clubs he's got, fingers in pies with in terms of his harem of players he has available. I think there's plenty there, which you wouldn't be surprised if something comes in. I mean, again, look at the effect he had on Wolves. Wolves signed some players they should never have signed. The likes of Ruben Neves and people like that, they should never have signed them, but they did. So yeah. Anyway, that is my predictions for the January transfer window. A bit early, I know, but I wanted to get it out there, get it into the ether. Now, I think a lot of things are I can see some clear strategy there. I can see some clear things which I think we know the priority will be well, let's believe 3 players: centre half, centre forward, midfielder. So it could be Cresswell, Traore. Cresswell, 𝗙𝗓𝗩𝗘, for example, and maybe Traore as the fourth. That's what we're looking at. It's clear that Nuno wants to put a stamp down on his squad as well. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Take care. Stay safe. Stay warm. We'll be back for Hammer's Headlines a little bit later on with some transfer rumours. Apologies, transfer rumours as well. And as I said, we'll start all the coverage ahead of the game on Saturday. We'll start it tomorrow morning and stuff. So anyway, take care. Much love. Bye-bye.